Hey, Bubba. Say hey.
On June 16, 2025, at approximately 6:51 p.m., Brandon police received multiple 911 calls reporting gunfire at the McDonald's located on Stribling Lane. Witnesses stated that 25-year-old Kianna Jackson had been shot and that 27-year-old John Terry's Dampier appeared to be injured. Customers evacuated the building. Employees secured themselves in storage areas until law enforcement arrived. When officers entered the restaurant, they located Kianna Jackson unresponsive with multiple gunshot wounds on the floor. John Terry's Dampier was also found with a gunshot wound that appeared self-inflicted. Emergency medical personnel pronounced Jackson deceased at the scene. Dampier was transported to a nearby hospital in critical condition. Authorities immediately secured the perimeter and collected initial statements from witnesses.
I've never heard anyone to this extent. I mean, there's been other things, but it's a pretty quiet, pretty safe area. I've been here for 16 years and never heard anything to this extent.
One resident says this sort of violence shows the kind of times we are living in.
It's very uncommon for this area to have that type of violent crime. But, it's unfortunate. It's a little indicative of the times that we live in, and sad for the family. Prayers to the family, of course, and those who are involved.
Surveillance footage and 911 recordings were obtained for the investigation. Preliminary findings indicated that the incident was isolated and domestic in nature. There were no additional suspects, and the firearm used was recovered at the scene. Jackson's two children, ages 5 and 3, were present but were not physically harmed. On June 18, 2025, Dampier died from his self-inflicted injuries.
Police have identified both the victim and the suspect in a deadly shooting outside the McDonald's in Brandon last night. 12 News' Jacoby A. Smith is live at the Brandon Police Department with new details. Jacoby, what can you tell us?
Yes, Byron and Mill. Police say they found the body of 25-year-old Kianna Jackson in the parking lot on Stribling Road around 7 p.m. The suspect has been identified as 27-year-old John Terry Dampier.
The case was officially classified as a domestic violence murder-suicide. Investigators confirmed that Jackson and Dampier had a prior relationship and shared children together. No restraining orders or prior domestic violence reports were released to the public. The incident resulted in the death of Kianna Jackson and the death of John Terry's Dampier, leaving 2 minor children without their mother. The investigation concluded without criminal proceedings. Authorities cited the case as an example of a domestic dispute escalating in a public location, raising questions about the sequence of events that led to the fatal confrontation. Stay with us as we unravel the shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Kianna Ola Jackson was a 25-year-old resident of Pearl, Mississippi, a suburban community located about 15 miles from downtown Jackson. Her name first appeared in local and national headlines in mid-June 2025 following a deadly incident at McDonald's in the nearby city of Brandon. Kiana was a mother of 2 children, a daughter, age 5, and a son, age 3. Both were in her custody at the time of the incident. Family members and online fundraisers described her as a cherished mother whose primary focus was raising her children. She spent much of her daily life caring for them, coordinating playdates, and connecting with other young mothers in her community. Neighbors and friends often saw Kiana participating in routine family activities, taking her children to local parks, stopping at neighborhood stores, and spending time with relatives. Her social life appeared to revolve around her children and a small circle of friends. Reports from those close to her noted that she had expressed plans to return to school, potentially to study nursing or a healthcare-related field. A GoFundMe page created by family members shortly after her death described Kiana as someone who touched many hearts. This description reflected the general sentiment shared on social media and in local comments after the incident. Community members characterized her as optimistic, family-oriented, and focused on building a better future for her children. Though not a public figure, Kiana's story became widely known the days after the shooting because of the tragic circumstances and the ripple effect on her young children and extended family. The suspect identified in the case was John Terry Dampier, age 27. He was a resident of Mendenhall, Mississippi, a small city located roughly 30 miles from Pearl. His name entered public record when Brandon police and media outlets confirmed him as the individual connected to the shooting. Authorities reported that Dampier was either an intimate partner or co-parent to Kianna Jackson. The two shared 2 young children. Officials classified the incident as a domestic-related shooting, but did not release detailed information about the nature of their ongoing relationship or the events that might have led to the fatal confrontation. Law enforcement agencies provided no evidence of prior restraining orders, domestic incident reports, or calls for service involving the couple. As of the initial investigation, the public record showed no formal complaints or legal interventions that might have signaled prior violence. While his criminal history was not detailed publicly, police statements and media reporting implied no extensive prior criminal record. Investigators and local officials treated the shooting as an isolated incident, rooted in domestic conflict, though they did not disclose the exact motive. The timeline of events and the self-inflicted gunshot wound that followed indicated a sudden and fatal escalation. Publicly available information suggested a rapid shift from routine daily life to lethal violence, without clear pre-event signals shared with community or law enforcement. On Monday, June 16, 2025, Kianna Jackson followed a routine day that reflected her typical role as a mother. Earlier in the afternoon, she visited a local park in Pearl with her 2 children. While at the park, she reportedly met another mother and had a casual conversation about family life and her personal plans. During that conversation, she mentioned her intentions to return to school and continue building a better future. Witnesses indicated that she did not appear fearful or distressed. There were no visible indications of conflict or that she was being followed or monitored at that time. Between approximately 6:45 and 6:50 p.m., Kiana drove to a McDonald's located at 132 Stribling Lane in Brandon, Mississippi. Brandon is a neighboring city to Pearl, known for its residential areas and commercial corridors that include fast food locations frequented by families. The McDonald's where the incident occurred was open for evening service and reportedly had multiple customers and employees present. The restaurant's drive-thru and dining area were both operational. No unusual disturbances or warnings were reported before the incident. Kiana's 2 young children were with her during this stop. This trip to McDonald's appeared to be an ordinary family errand on a Monday evening. At approximately 6:51 p.m., the routine environment of McDonald's was broken by the sound of gunfire. Multiple 911 calls were made by patrons and employees. Police later confirmed that gunshots were fired inside and possibly just outside the restaurant. Witnesses reported that people in the dining area and drive-thru lane reacted immediately. Some hid in restrooms or behind counters, while others fled the building. Officers arriving on scene found Kianna Jackson with multiple gunshot wounds. She had collapsed and showed no signs of life. John Terry Dampier was also located on the scene with a gunshot wound that investigators later identified as self-inflicted. Emergency responders, including police and medical personnel, arrived shortly after the first calls. Officers secured the scene to ensure there was no ongoing threat. Kianna Jackson was pronounced dead at the scene by first responders. John Terry Dampier was transported to a nearby hospital in critical condition. Brandon Police Department issued initial statements to local media, confirming that the shooting appeared to be domestic in nature and that no other suspects were involved.
Residents here tell me tonight that they are in shock. They also tell me that this kind of thing doesn't happen in Brandon. According to the Brandon Police Department, officers were called to the McDonald's just before 7. When they arrived, they found Kianna Jackson had been shot and killed. The suspect was taken to the hospital from a self-inflicted gunshot. Longtime Brandon resident Trisha Hayes says Brandon is normally a safe area.
I've never heard anyone to this extent. I mean, there's been other things, but it's a pretty quiet, pretty safe area. I've been here for 16 years and never heard anything to this extent.
One resident says this sort of violence shows the kind of times we are living in.
It's very uncommon for this area to have that type of violent crime. But, it's unfortunate. It's a little indicative of the times that we live in, and sad for the family. Prayers to the family, of course, and those that are involved.
The suspect, John Terrius Dampier, is currently in the hospital. Police say he suffered a self-inflicted gunshot wound. They say he is being monitored and charges are pending. And we did reach out to McDonald's today, and they did let us know that they are providing support to the restaurant employees. Live in Brandon, Kendall Jones, 16.
The incident transitioned from an active response to a contained investigation within minutes of the first shots. Investigators collected physical evidence from the restaurant and surrounding parking lot. Items secured included shell casings, a firearm, and personal belongings from the victim and suspect. Surveillance footage from the restaurant and parking lot was recovered, but not immediately released to the public. 911 calls and police dispatch audio were also withheld as the investigation continued. Local media first reported the incident within hours. WLBT, a Jackson area news station, confirmed that a woman had been shot and killed and that a man was hospitalized with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. By the following morning, regional and national outlets, including People, WDBJ7, and Suggest, had picked up the story. Early headlines focused on the victim, identifying her as a cherished mother of two. Reporters provided basic biographical information. She was 25 years old, from Pearl, Mississippi, and the mother of a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. Details about the shooter and the domestic connection to the crime were initially sparse, with law enforcement confirming only that the incident was domestic violence related. As media coverage expanded, attention turned to public safety, domestic violence awareness, and community reaction. However, investigators continued to withhold full details of the couple's history, any prior domestic complaints, and the content of surveillance recordings. The suspect, later identified as 27-year-old John Terrius Dampier of Mendenhall, Mississippi, was transported from the scene to a nearby hospital in critical condition. He had sustained a self-inflicted gunshot wound, which authorities believed occurred immediately after the attack on Kianna Jackson. 2 days later, on June 18, 2025, Dampier succumbed to his injuries. With the death of the only identified suspect, the Rankin County authorities officially classified the case as a murder-suicide. This effectively closed the criminal investigation, as there would be no prosecution. Law enforcement emphasized that the shooting was isolated and domestic in nature, reinforcing that no broader threat existed to the public. In the days following the shooting, Kianna Jackson's family and community began organizing efforts to manage the sudden tragedy. A GoFundMe campaign was launched to cover funeral expenses and provide financial support for her 2 young children. The fundraiser quickly gained traction, raising over $20,000 within a few days. The fundraiser description emphasized her dedication as a mother, highlighting that the children had been left without their primary caregiver. Family members issued brief public statements, focusing on logistical needs and acknowledging the support of friends, neighbors, and strangers who donated. On social media, local residents and acquaintances of the victim shared expressions of sympathy and shock. Some posts hinted at prior relationship problems between the victim and the suspect, although no official documentation or public police record was available to confirm these accounts. Community reaction blended grief with questions about domestic violence awareness and prevention. Even with the suspect deceased and the case closed criminally, key investigative threads remained under examination or public discussion. Authorities did not release any prior incident reports involving Kianna Jackson and John Terrius Dampier. It remained unclear if law enforcement or social services had been aware of any domestic issues before the shooting. This lack of clarity led to questions about hidden abuse, missed warning signs, or silent escalation that went unreported until the incident turned fatal. Investigators confirmed that the suspect used a firearm, but details of ownership were not provided. Public records did not indicate that the suspect legally owned or was licensed to carry the weapon. This left open questions. Was a firearm legally purchased or obtained through private sale? Could prior domestic concerns or red flags have prevented the suspect from having access to a weapon? Were there any opportunities for intervention that could have disrupted the sequence of events? The 2 children, ages 5 and 3, were present during or immediately adjacent to the event. Though law enforcement did not release full details on their exact location at the moment of the shooting, Sources confirmed they were with their mother that evening. Their custody and care became an immediate concern for the family. Guardianship was assumed by relatives, supported initially by community fundraising. The emotional and psychological impact on the children was not discussed publicly, but the circumstances ensured they were witnesses to sudden loss. As the media cycle moved forward, several facts remained unreleased or unresolved. Surveillance footage from inside the McDonald's and its drive-through lanes had not been shown publicly. 911 call transcripts and dispatch audio remained sealed, leaving unanswered questions about the exact sequence of shooting and the suspect's final actions. Relationship history between Kianna Jackson and John Terry's Dampier was only lightly documented, preventing a clear public understanding of whether intervention opportunities existed. By late June 2025, law enforcement concluded the case as a domestic violence murder-suicide. No further criminal proceedings would occur. The community impact continued, particularly for the victim's children and immediate family, who were left to manage both the emotional loss and the practical challenges of guardianship and support. The case underscores ongoing challenges in recognizing and preventing domestic violence that escalates to public and fatal outcomes. Even in a highly visible public space, the attack unfolded in minutes, leaving a family without its mother and the community with lingering questions about prevention, intervention, and firearm access. On June 16, 2025, a public act of domestic violence unfolded in Brandon, Mississippi, that drew the attention of both local authorities and national media. It began as a routine evening for 25-year-old Kianna Jackson, a mother of two young children, and ended in a fatal sequence that law enforcement would ultimately classify as a murder-suicide. Kianna Jackson was 25 years old and resided in Pearl, Mississippi, a suburban community not far from Brandon. She was a mother of two children, ages 5 and 3. According to friends and family members, she had expressed intentions of returning to school, and she was described by her community as family-oriented and active in her children's lives. The suspect was identified as 27-year-old John Terry's Dampier of Mendenhall, Mississippi. He was reportedly Kianna's intimate partner and the father of her children. Investigators categorized the case as an incident of domestic violence, though they did not publicly disclose whether prior reports, complaints, or restraining orders had been filed. The events of June 16th began with what appeared to be a normal day. That evening, Kianna reportedly spent time with her children at a local park, interacted with another mother, and talking about her personal goals. At approximately 6:45 to 6:50 p.m., Kianna arrived at the McDonald's located on Stribling Lane in Brandon. The restaurant was a typical weekday evening stop for families and commuters. Reports indicate that she entered the premises with her two children. At around 6:51 p.m., gunshots were reported inside the McDonald's. Witnesses immediately called 911, and customers either fled the restaurant or hid in available spaces. When police arrived on the scene, they found Kianna Jackson with multiple gunshot wounds. She was pronounced dead at the scene by emergency responders. The suspect, John Terry's Dampier, was also found at the scene with self-inflicted gunshot wound. He was transported to a local hospital in critical condition. Law enforcement secured the area and informed the public that there was no ongoing threat. Authorities treated the incident as an isolated domestic violence event. Brandon police conducted the primary investigation and were assisted by local emergency medical personnel. They confirmed the initial sequence of events. Kiana had been shot, and the suspect had turned the gun on himself. The case gained immediate media attention, both locally and nationally. Outlets including WLBT, People magazine, and other regional publications reported the fatal shooting. Early coverage emphasized the public nature of the incident and the domestic connection between the victim and the suspect. Initial details were limited, with authorities withholding surveillance footage, 911 recordings, and specific information about the firearm involved. On June 18, 2025, 2 days after the shooting, Dampier died from his self-inflicted injuries. This closed the criminal aspect of the case, as there would be no trial or further prosecution. The case was officially classified as a domestic violence murder-suicide. Following the incident, Kiana's family organized a GoFundMe campaign to cover funeral expenses and to support her two children. The fundraiser drew significant attention, exceeding $20,000 in donations within days. Social media reflected a combination of shock and calls for awareness about domestic violence, with some posts suggesting that signs of trouble may have been present before the incident, although no formal public records of previous reports were confirmed. The two children were left without their mother and with the loss of their father. Their immediate care and financial support became the responsibility of Kiana's family, supplemented by the fundraiser. The Kianna Jackson case underscores the risk of public domestic violence incidents. Domestic disputes that escalate to violence are most often private. But this case demonstrates how these situations can move into public spaces, creating danger for bystanders and first responders. The shooting occurred in a family-friendly fast food restaurant during early evening hours, highlighting the unpredictability of such incidents. The case also sparks conversation about intervention and awareness. Domestic violence advocates frequently emphasize the importance of recognizing warning signs. Yet without public records or prior complaints, it is unclear whether any opportunities for intervention were present or missed in this case. The absence of known protective measures, such as restraining orders or law enforcement involvement prior to the shooting, leaves unanswered questions about whether the risk was visible to others. On a systemic level, the case raises critical questions. Could preventive measures have stopped this incident? Without documented prior threats or complaints, formal interventions are limited. However, community-based support, early intervention programs, and firearm access restrictions for individuals with a history of domestic disputes are key topics in ongoing policy discussions. What role does firearm access play in domestic violence escalations? Authorities did not disclose whether the suspect's gun was legally owned. Studies have consistently linked firearm access with higher rates of fatal domestic incidents, which highlights the importance of legal, safety, and background check processes. Are there silent warning signs that go unreported? Many domestic violence victims do not report threats or abuse to authorities due to fear, stigma, or hope for reconciliation. Without these reports, law enforcement often has no ground to intervene before violence occurs. The Kianna Jackson case, therefore, represents a multi-layered domestic violence failure point. A private conflict escalated into a public homicide, leaving children orphaned and a community grappling with the sudden visibility of an often hidden problem. With the suspect deceased, the case concluded with an official classification of murder-suicide due to domestic violence. No criminal trial will occur, leaving the incident documented solely through investigative reports and media coverage. The community is left with unanswered questions. Why did this conflict escalate in a public space? Were there prior indicators that could have prompted intervention? Could tighter domestic violence monitoring or firearm restrictions have prevented the shooting? Kiana's death leaves two young children without a mother, and her family and community must navigate the aftermath without the closure a trial might have provided. The case stands as a reminder of the unpredictable and lethal potential of domestic violence, particularly when it reaches a public sphere, and of the systemic challenges in preventing such tragedies before they unfold. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.